Control yourself. Don't drink too much. Don't talk too much.
Welcome to Over It. I'm so excited today that I have my dear friend Sharon Clayman, who's joining the
Mhm.
show today. Hi, Sharon.
It's weird to call you Donna.
I know.
My monkey. So
We call each other usually Monkey. I'm Monkey and you're Monkey too.
right.
And you are a mom of two beautiful children.
Right. Yes.
You are a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
You are a baker, sometimes professionally.
Sometimes.
Yes. How else would you describe yourself?
Um, I'm I'm a mover. I'm a mover and a shaker. I like to be biking and on my Peloton or outside and walking and swimming and yoga and weightlifter. And if I had more time in the day, I would be moving more.
And you like to walk the dog. Okay, you don't like to walk the dog, but you do walk the dog a lot because a lot of times when I'm talking to you, you're walking the dog.
So there's walking the dog, which involves the dog's needs,
Yeah.
which means slow and sniffing the flowers. And then there's walking, which is like you and I might walk, where we actually go and we're at a good pace and we usually don't stop and we get our heart rate up and we've got a rhythm. Whereas it's very staccato with the dog. So
Yeah. It's like a sniff and drag or a drag and sniff.
it's a sniff and it's not in a stop and a poop. And it's
Yeah.
a sniff and a stop and a poop. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So we should let people know that we've known each other for a very, 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 very long time. You're like my sister from another mister.
Right. We've actually been alive like hundreds of years, but we actually just
It
look,
does feel
we've
that
known
way.
each other across the centuries. We just take
Yes.
excellent care of ourselves.
Yes. And we met when we were doing our internship the last year of our doctoral program,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Yeah,
think we really bonded through our shared anxiety.
absolutely.
I think anxiety has been the foundation of our friendship.
Continues to be a solid theme.
A solid theme that runs
Something,
through.
something which I wish I were over and not quite yet over it.
Right.
I just kind of weaving in the theme, trying to work through and over anxiety.
Right. Anxiety has been, would you say, a constant companion, a near constant companion in your journey?
Definitely. Yes. A best friend that I wish that I didn't have.
Mm.
Or, yeah,
Do you
something.
want to just jump right in? Can I just say, so I remember
Yeah.
meeting you the first day of our
Yeah.
internship, and they were going over the manual. And in the manual for the interns, they talked about what they called the compromised intern. And a compromised intern was someone who couldn't make it through the internship, because they had become compromised in some way. And I remember I read that and thought, oh no, I don't want to become the compromised intern. And thinking, well, if I get really anxious this year, I could definitely be the compromised intern. And then
Mhm.
you and I went on a walk, one of our very first days of the internship, and you said, I'm so anxious. And I said, I'm so anxious too. So yeah, can you share a little bit about like your journey with anxiety and like how far back do you remember it? And
Yeah. I think it was on the doorstep when I came into this world, just waiting there for
the vaginal doorstep,
me.
or I don't know, did you come through cesarean?
No, I did not come through cesarean, but I feel like I was swimming in a pool of it. I was probably just swimming in a pool of it inside the
Oh,
womb.
in the womb, picking up, yeah, on your mom's anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
eating.
just eating that and then just the generations of anxiety prior to that. So it's just been the gift that keeps on giving over the generations. And yeah, I see it in my kids. I feel like it's just, I mean, it's been part of my ancestors' journey, my mom's journey. Um, I did not get enough of the logical side of the brain of from my dad. And now I can see it in my kids. So it's been there, and um there's been every iteration. But I do, I think back to memories like when other people reflected it back to me. Like I can remember in high school, and maybe even before that in like middle school, just going back, and in high school, someone reflecting back to me that I just was like the most anxious person that like they'd ever met. And I was so anxious about this particular thing that she couldn't believe how anxious I was. It was mostly about like going to college. And
So you were surprised to hear that it was actually that apparent to at least some of the people around you.
it wasn't normative.
It wasn't normative.
Yeah, it wasn't normative. That what I was experiencing was more than other people around me.
And even at that age, did you feel different because of the anxiety?
I don't think I really felt apart because the high school community that I went to were a lot of very, very high achievers who held a lot of anxiety themselves.
Okay.
Um,
So
it
you were
was
surrounded by some anxiety in school.
definitely
That was very much around achievement.
it was more a norm. Yeah.
But your anxiety, would you say, it transcended more than just achievement-oriented issues?
Mm. Um, Definitely, but that has been certainly a theme throughout that around just wanting to do more and perfectionistic about the outcomes and it not and taking on more or moving faster and um
Maybe some fears too around, will I be capable of handling or managing my life or more responsibility or a new challenge?
and absolutely, but that's actually a part of it because as I push myself to do more and to be more, it's a part of me that actually tries to gain the confidence that by taking so much on so that I can then feel I'm always chasing that more capable, more achieved, more actualized so that I can internalize it.
So
Right.
the hope is I will internalize that I can handle more, but the anxiety typically just like raises the bar, right? It just goes on to the next thing. It's like, yeah, I did that, but
Right,
now it's
right.
about this. So the anxiety is kind of like whack-a-mole, right? It just like moves from
Totally.
thing to thing. And you're saying like there's not this true internalization of, oh, wait, I'm competent, I'm capable.
Right. Exactly. It stays in this very external realm, right?
Hmm.
And so it just really connects with this uh overdoing and thus then exhaustion and running. And so most recently, right, it's during a previous recent conversation that we had, really talked about really just trying to shift to being really intentional about changing the process because right, I'm 48, almost 49, and I'm starting to realize that that's not working. Can you imagine half a decade, half a century of just chasing this higher achievement, sense of higher achieving in order to feel more capable. And I think I've had it all wrong, right? It's really about slowing down. That's doing less, feeling more comfortable in the here and now, not trying to prove myself to myself.
Yeah. And I mean, the anxiety. So when you're trying to slow down and you're trying to relax and you're trying to do less and not more, I would imagine the anxiety may come up and say, wait a minute, like you're really messing with things here. Do you
Mhm.
feel it sort of at the edges trying to tell you, wait, this isn't the way we do it?
Not yet, but this is a very new thing, so we'll have to do a part two.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly it's me just actually feeling like I'm naturally doing more, being asked to do more, take more on, respond to more, and um then not being able to keep up and feeling just this exhaustion, like these clouds of exhaustion just kind of moving in, and I can really just feel it in my body, like just this spaciness, this depletedness. It's like a lightheaded, but like heavy. And it's just this very thematic, cognitive, emotional, right? All of that experience. And it's like, I think that's when I start to feel a little more anxious actually, because it's like I'm being asked to do more than I can do.
So now when you feel that spacey feeling, is that your signal to slow down
Uh-huh.
as opposed to speeding up more?
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. Or just and ignoring them.
So
Yeah.
that's a tremendous change. Like you're completely changing lanes here. And I'm wondering, what are the ingredients? Or what do you think has helped support you in kind of shifting gears in terms of your response to the anxiety?
I think it's just enough failure, enough times of just trying to do one thing and it not working. Right? And I think it's been, I mean, certainly at least since the beginning of COVID, of just like running ragged and then hitting a wall. And it's like I'm depleted. I need to take a break like now. Like burnout, exhaustion. Um, and then never really getting enough time to feel like I was um rested and getting back on the horse again and just plowing ahead, going for and I think that that would happen quarterly. Push, 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 push. Okay, I need to stop. I it's not that I want to, it's like I need to breathe, I need to slow down, I need to sleep.
Yeah, this has been a pattern, we've been talking about for a long time,
Hmm.
where it's sort of like you work, 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 work in every area of your life to the point of collapse. And then you get to go on a vacation, let's say,
Yeah,
or get to take a little bit of time off, but
yeah,
you can't ever really reset.
no,
You can't reset. And then you're right back into it, right? And you're back
yeah,
right back into all of the different treadmills in life,
yeah.
which
And
can
that's
lead to feelings of despair.
despair, anxiety, exhaustion, depletion, my
You
depression, all
Depression. Yeah,
yeah.
you recently went on a trip to Scotland, and it feels like that was also instrumental, it seems. I don't know, from my perspective, in terms of your sort of continuing to switch gears. Can you speak a little
Um,
bit about what you gleaned from that trip?
yeah, it was a longer break than I usually take. And it was a really nice balance of just um rather than balance, I should just say like it fed me in ways that I need to be fed. Right. Just sort of it was a recharge in the sense that I got to like all my senses were awakened just through food and sights and learning and smells and it just touched on so many things that just were awakening for me, and I think the novelty of it all was really nice and
Being in part of a
awakening.
different culture, right?
Yeah, just the stories around the history that I was learning were just new stories around a history of the world that I had not really been exposed to or heard of.
Mm.
Or it just furthered the stories, historical stories that I knew of. It was like, oh, this is an extension of that. Or just being exposed to a new accent.
A new accent. Yeah. I think there's also too something about, I mean, I feel like whenever I travel, one thing that strikes me when I'm out of the United States is that comparatively speaking, there's less rush, 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 rush,
Yeah.
and more of an opportunity. And I see it in the people around me to
Mhm.
really kind of slow down and savor the moment, whether that's an extra long lunch or a siesta, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
But there's something that's built into other cultures that's more about savoring that moment, taking that time with family, taking time to chew your food, taking time to, whatever that is, to take your rest. And it feels less harried. And people are taking time to connect and talk over a meal or
Yeah.
talk in a cafe. And to me, I'm always struck by that whenever I'm out of the country. And I always strive to take a little bit of that back with me and try to hold on to it for as long as I can,
Yeah.
right? Just a reminder that, oh, there's some other way to live.
Yeah. Every time that I've been specifically to Europe, and that's
Yeah.
where I spent majority of my travels. Although I've traveled other places, that's especially I feel like a part of the world where people aren't invested in this capitalistic notion of living this pressured, lifestyle that's oriented towards earning all the time or doing more. And so, yeah, having meal like I woke up on this trip to just a breakfast sitting every day.
Sitting and eating your breakfast.
Sitting and eating my breakfast. I had food.
Mm-hmm.
Normally don't, I mean, not do in the morning, depending on how much time I have.
Because at
You
home, you're so rushed.
yeah, I'm exhausted, so I sleep until the last minute, and then I don't have a lot of time after I get up to prepare food, and then I'm off to the office, and then I'm on to my first client, and I haven't really necessarily had anything to eat or a bite of something. But it's right a real future orientation throughout the day. It's how can I get through this day?
How can I
And
get through it?
ending versus being like I'm here in this moment and doing something that matters, and I'm not rushing to the next thing.
How do you reconcile it? It's like as you're trying to respond differently to your anxiety and, you know, how do you reconcile the pull in our culture and the ways we've set up our lives with our kids and everything of like, this one has to go there and that one has to go there. And the partner has to get picked up and I got to do this. And I like, how do you reconcile how you aspire to be with all of that pull?
I think it's being what's the word that I'm looking for? Just taking out the have tos and recognizing so much of it is choice and
Choice.
and letting things flop. Like I'm really trying to be more open and accepting that like I'm gonna mess up and I'm gonna be late or I'm gonna miss something and I'm not gonna return some messages and like just being more accepting around that. Here there's just again such a culture around must respond to everything, must be on time, must, be just perfect around communication and timeliness and
And then
versus
the trickle down right to the kids in terms of like children in the society tend to be pretty scheduled, sometimes overscheduled. And so then we're all sort of running in our own treadmills, right? Even the kids are. And the
right,
idea is like expose them to as much as possible and make sure they're getting a taste of
right,
everything.
right. So it's like an act of rebellion, I feel like actually to like take a nap in the middle of the day or to sit down and read a book or to I wore my slippers to work on Friday and I had meetings and I'm like I'm rebelling against this culture of like dress up, be professional, be in the move, look perfect, fit the mold. I'm like, I'm gonna be relaxed.
Hmm. Over It is proudly sponsored by the Couples Center of the Pioneer Valley, offering specialized services to couples and individuals with relationship issues and concerns. Check them out on the web at pioneervalleycouplestherapy.com or call them at 413-570-0067. You said earlier about this intergenerational pattern of anxiety that's both, sort of hardwired and modeled.
Mhm.
Like, what did you see in terms of, you mentioned your mom more so than your dad being more sort of the rational, sort of pragmatic,
Yeah.
and your mom being more of the overtly anxious one.
Oh.
Your mom's not with us anymore. This isn't about criticizing mom, but like, just what was modeled for you?
Um, so many little things, millions of little things, but the general gist was this atmosphere of scarcity,
Mm,
that this this nonverbal communication, that if we weren't preparing for Armageddon, then we were,
mm,
ultimately collapse and suffer. And so there was always a sense of um the world is not a safe place. Others are not kind. So we need to shield ourselves, and we shield ourselves by um, being suspicious, not going anywhere that doesn't seem safe, even if it's like the ATM in the middle of our upper middle class white suburb, in the early evening. Like, don't do that. Don't go. Um, to like hoarding things, really um, buying excessively for, with this sense of like, it was never explicitly stated, but like, if we don't have an abundance, then we're going to have nothing.
and that even translated to sort of food and the hoarding of food.
Uh, hoarding of, trying to think, especially with the food, what I remember the most was, we had a lot of cans, and there was just like this bunker in the
Mhm.
basement with a lot of cans and packaged goods. But it was especially mentality of like, you don't throw anything away. Like, if a piece of food is going bad or rotting, like, you cut that off and you eat the rest.
Where did that come from for your mom?
I think it was just abject poverty.
Yeah, she grew up in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And you did not grow up in poverty, right? Your parents ultimately did well. Your father is a
Yeah.
doctor, podiatrist, right? But despite the comfortable living that they ultimately achieved, your mom carried that fear of lack and that scarcity
Mhm.
mentality, and your father too, right? To a certain extent, your dad was in there too, right? Bringing the 2 cans of tuna fish on vacation, and we always used to laugh. Your parents bringing the Tupperware to the buffet, and by the way, we all know my parents are knuck and futz too. So, but yeah, that they maintained that no matter, so it didn't match up. So there's that real cognitive dissonance of like, anxiety is sky high,
Yeah.
but on the
Yeah.
rational plane, there's nothing
It
that
never,
matches up with that.
right? It never translated into any sort of emotional comfort
No emotional comfort.
around this, or comfort in that we have enough.
So is there an element there that you've also had to work with, or like a scarcity mentality that's, or fear of lack,
Mm.
that's been difficult for you?
Very difficult to shed that.
Yeah.
Very difficult to shed that. I do have that internally. I'm very much aware of that. And so there's this urge a lot to like, maybe I need to buy like more of that, or have an excess, or, we need to, we're not going to have enough. And so that's very much in an internal place for me, even though we have plenty. It's a mentality that just got transmitted non-verbally. I'm hoping that I see a little bit with my kids, like and them not wanting to get rid of things.
Mm.
So I'm cognizant of how much this may or may not get transmitted, but in so many ways, I think I try to be a little extravagant to undo some of that.
Just to shake it loose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it doesn't. I'm just. I don't know that I'll be of the generation that ever totally shakes that loose.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so ingrained from years and years and years of living in those waters.
So we're talking about, you said, half of a century of sort of responding to anxiety by amping up. And now as you're coming closer and closer to 50, saying, I need to make a change here in terms of how I respond to this. And I'm
Yeah,
going to do something really radical, a real act of rebellion. And in the face of the
yeah.
anxiety, slow down.
And in the face of our culture,
And in the face of
try,
our culture,
try, right? All I can do is
try.
try. That's my intention, and I feel like it's just iterations. It's like that's how I have observed learning happening. It's like you try something and then it works for a little bit and then you get pulled back to your old ways and then somehow you're reminded of, what feels most authentic and true and best, and then it's like a recommitment to that, and then it's like you kind of pull off your center, and then it's like, oh, it's often traveling that just kind of brings me back to my center, that reminds me, like, outside of this whirlwind of like a life where in the US where work is really so centralized for us. But that's not I never I love my work and I identify with my work a lot, but want I don't want to live a life in which my work is always going to be have just such a strong hold and such a big place in my life. I think I saw my parents really over identified with their work growing up. That's all they were. My dad in retirement is still just his work self. There weren't really other facets
There
of
wasn't the opportunity that, or they didn't take the opportunity to develop self in other ways other than career, right?
very well. Yeah.
And your mom and dad worked together, right? Your mom did all of the bookkeeping and
Yeah. She was the office manager, the secretary, the biller, the everything administrative for his business.
your parents were together like every day, like all day long, right? At work, at home. They led a very insular existence with you and your brother. There
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of extended family around. It was very much like, we're on this island and we've got to survive, right?
Survivor, right? Just that show. It's like that was my home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And like we need to keep our ship safe. Um yeah, and my dad still lives in that house.
And he's still working, even though he's supposed to be retired.
He's still
Yeah.
working. The house looks the same. He's got some stuff, but
Yeah.
no,
And
he's
it's
still
just
living.
so amazing, right? To really reflect on, like, we know we have these patterns, but like, I think as we get older and older, to just sort of really look at the ways that we're absolutely replicating the emotional experience. So whatever that version of survival was, that was modeled for you, that became internalized, that we're
Yeah.
carrying forward, right?
And I think we all do that. Like it's just, it's what's implicit. And until it becomes explicit and we can name that and we can start to get some distance from it and we can bring awareness to it. I mean, I just think it takes a lifetime to undo this stuff.
Right. To have awareness around it, to make different conscious choices around it
Yeah.
that are supported. And I think it just makes me think about how important it is to have people in our lives that we can reality check with. I mean, you and I do that a lot for one another,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, reality check with and who have similar values, right? That feels so important. And I think I've struggled more over the last, decade or so, really finding people in this little insular community that I'm in who share similar values as you and I do. And, around just the development of so many different aspects of self and not having like kids and work as like end all be all, but being really more like having many different aspects of themselves develop.
That I am my own woman, independent of the fact that I'm a mother or I'm a partner or I'm a this in the world or that, like some aspect of meanness that is just unique to me, right?
Yeah. And that right, being very much embodying and being proud of a sense of like that there's some complexity to who I am. I'm not just, you know, um, enmeshed with this one aspect of who I am, but really take pride and continue to seek to be, developed in so many on different levels.
And we talk about it, a tough subject, and we won't name any names for either of us, but just the loss of certain friendships along the way.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
your experience around that. I mean,
yeah,
given that it is hard, right? Especially, sometimes as we get older to really make new friends. So
yeah.
there is sometimes a tendency to hold on to old friends.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say yes, I did have I've had some catastrophic, friendship losses over the years. And there are a few that come to mind more than others just because it really was an ugly experience. But it brings sadness, so much sadness to experience loss of something that was so important.
And in these cases, we're not talking about deaths. We're talking about
Yes.
friendships that ended
Yep.
that were of great value at one
Yep.
point,
Yep. Yep.
and things went sideways.
Yes.
And although I'm not completely unbiased, I can say as a bystander, some of the ones that I've witnessed, it seems like have been sort of things that were sort of enacted and were not as you would wish them to be, and were really confusing and hurtful and painful and really pulled on. I don't want to tell, I'll speak for myself. When these things have happened to me, what it's pulled on for me is sort of that old sense of like, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong?
Oh, yes.
Even if, like, I really am looking at the facts and the situations and saying, I actually really don't think it's me,
Yeah.
but this person may be telling me it's me. They may be telling me I've been harmful or hurtful, and that matters, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
just how tricky and confusing and painful it can be to navigate that with friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that at least for me, right, it's been such a gift to have people in my life over the course of decades. And I don't count a ton of people in that list. And I think what you're referring to a friend of mine who was one of those who was in my life for decades. And right for me, like when I really have somebody in that core group, somebody who I trust, who I've experienced life with over such a period of time, there's just such a sense of like this person is family.
Right.
You are family to me. And when there's a falling out, it feels absolutely devastating. It's like, a seminal life experience. I mean, I think when we're sort of looking back on things, that's the sort of experience that will stand out for me are this loss. Um,
And
you know,
especially, I think the loss like that one where you have a realization that this is not fixable.
Yeah.
This goes beyond like, can I forgive it? This is like, perhaps this person
Right.
does not currently have the capacity to work this through with me.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yes, and I just think that over the course of a lifetime, like we are shifting, we are changing, we are learning, we're regressing, right? Moving in all these different directions. And some people are with us for that ride as they're shifting and changing and growing and regressing. And I think that sometimes just people are on, I think of like weather patterns, like over time, where
Weather
there's
patterns.
a
Yeah.
one front, like a big front moving in one direction, you're moving together. And then some, just those fronts part, and you just weren't meant to be moving together through this lifetime. And I think that it was a huge reckoning for me, because I just never even fathom that somebody who was kind of moving in this weather current with me would be, we'd be diverted um, from one another so in irreconcilable ways.
I guess in the vein of being over it, or in other words, having come to perhaps a place in yourself where
Yeah.
you knew that in order to stay in line with my values, my standards of behavior,
Yeah.
in order to be true to myself,
Hmm.
I cannot continue in this friendship, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, is there an element of like self-love in that? Is there an element of
Hmm.
healing in that, even though obviously it was incredibly painful?
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. But and it's been slow to come to see that. I mean, I think there's devastation and loss and grief, but also um, self love and growth and a deeper understanding and a growing capacity, right, to see that things change and alter, and not always in ways that feel good. And again, that I can navigate that. I can get through that.
Yeah, and I think for me as well, the piece that comes up is sort of really understanding through experience where my responsibility begins and ends,
Yeah.
in all relationships, but in friendships too.
Yeah.
Like, where does my responsibility begin and end?
Mm-hmm.
Like at what point am I taking on the responsibility of another's emotions? At one point, am I being asked to take on the responsibility of another's emotions, which is different than caring about somebody, right?
Yeah.
At what point am I sort of coming out of my own lane and moving into somebody else's lane where I'm
Mm-hmm.
overdoing, I'm
Mm.
over functioning, I'm over fixing, I'm over compensating, does that resonate?
Yeah, all of that. Really all of it. I mean, it's really, as I look back, on like the undoing of this relationship, it feels still really, it doesn't feel traumatic in hindsight, but I just have such a clear emotional a memory of feeling so um like I was tolerating and putting up with something much longer than what felt good or felt right.
And maybe
And
on some level, like overriding that feeling, which might have also been something old.
yeah, really probably not setting us being afraid to set some really clear boundaries around like this doesn't feel good. And then when I would set the boundaries, I would get really screamed at, or um they weren't received. Um there was often, a lot of anger around that, but just feeling kind of out of control with it all. And I don't know, I'm trying to think back about this piece about responsibility that you're mentioning. Um, I mean, for sure, I think that that's always a point of reflection. Like, what's my role in this? Wanting to hold responsibility, where responsibility is mine to hold, but at the same time recognizing, right, doing that self inventory. So much of the details of this, like, I've blocked out.
Well, there was a lot of second guessing of self, I remember, in your process, right?
Yeah, you might remember better than I do.
Well,
Yeah.
because there was a fair amount of gaslighting going on with this person.
Okay.
And this was somebody you really cared deeply. They were like family to you. And so when somebody you really care about is saying to you, no, 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 that's not how it is.
Yeah.
This
Yep.
is how it is. And you really start to second guess your own reality, your own emotional experience,
Yeah.
right? That doesn't just happen in love relationships, it can happen in friendships too.
Right. And I think there was an undoing that happened really over time in this relationship in a way that even wasn't made explicit to me, that this person was having a lot of feelings and experiences that they weren't really sharing directly with me. Um, and I think that that got really vomited out at some point.
There was a
Yeah.
lot being projected onto you that didn't feel like it was really yours.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, when I look back, like, this person probably overrode a lot of their own feelings of, like, I'm not okay with such and such. And didn't really speak up about that and kind
Right.
of tolerated for discomfort in the relationship with me for years.
And then grew resentful.
And then grew resentful and was avoiding, and it just hadn't been addressed. It could have been addressed years earlier. And
Right.
probably things would have been torn apart at that point,
Mm.
but it wouldn't have, there would have been a separation at that point. I just think that she had experiences in her life that made me a trigger, and probably vice versa, right? At some point, yeah, I was triggering her and not even really aware of that. And she may not have been aware how much she was getting triggered. And so there was
And
this
I
whole,
wonder for you too, like you getting
yeah,
triggered and sort of overriding that for yourself.
right. So much was like, can we pay attention to what's going on inside of ourselves and honor that?
Can we pay attention to what's going inside of ourselves and honor that? If you're enjoying Over It, make sure you follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Music.
And sometimes it's not so simple because there's a lot of forces pulling us in different directions.
Right.
Like the maintenance of what feels like a relationship with a family member.
Right.
Right? And that's we override in order to maintain what we think is the right thing. But, I think a lot of it goes back to just attachment, right? Wanting to maintain attachment, even when it's unhealthy, for fear of attachment loss and aloneness. And
Right. When real intimacy between any two people really starts to deepen, and right, we can have intimacy in non-romantic relationships. We have intimacy in our deep friendships, right? But whenever intimacy really deepens, that's where the shit gets real, right? So that's where we start to unconsciously, if we're not conscious of it, unconsciously start to try to do the dance with this other person or
Mhm.
parts of the dance that
Yeah.
were unresolved for us
Yeah.
from our family of origin and other past relationships. And we cast one another in very similar roles from the past. And we project things onto that person like they're a walking projection screen. And right, it's, so if
Yeah.
both people are doing that, to whatever extent they're both doing it,
Hmm.
but then if one person really starts to become more and more aware of their own stuff, their own projections, as well as the other person's stuff and their projections, and
Right.
maybe they try to share some insights about that, that may or may not go over well.
Right. Right. And then, and I think what gets thrown into the mix is that when each person starts to say, like, no, that doesn't feel good for me, or no, I don't want to do that, or set some boundaries, right? It creates um hard feelings, right? And I think once you said something to me that really stuck. I don't even know if you know how much it stuck with me, but you said to me once, right, um, uh, that learning to accept that, um, and what were your beautiful words? Something I won't try to recreate, but it was something along the lines of, that you're going to disappoint people
That you're
and
going to disappoint people.
learning to tolerate. And that may mean,
Yes. Learning to tolerate that you're going to disappoint people in order to be healthy.
yeah, that being healthy often means having difficult conversations. It may mean separating. It may mean getting distance from somebody.
Right.
And that's not ever like, that's still something that's hard for me that I'm still working on. That's hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, especially if our pattern has been to like pretzel shape ourselves to fit somebody else's needs and desires. It's such an easy thing to fall back into without even realizing we've done it.
Yeah.
And then when your back starts to break, literally or figuratively, and you're aching all over, it's sometimes a sign like I am just twisting myself out of shape.
Yeah.
To try to be what everybody else needs me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lost my core. I've lost what it is that, I align with.
Yeah. So it's this journey and has really been so much about like trying to figure out how to come back to my core self, how to stay in alignment with my core self, how to be more aware of what is my core self. And that's a lot. It's a lot of slowing down and paying attention and navigating and negotiating. And all right, it's hard to just live in this pure space of like not tolerating anything else anything that pulls me away from my authentic core self. I don't know. It's just still a journey of trying to figure that out.
Absolutely.
It's aligned with my authentic core self.
So we're just having a total chuckle here because Sharon was saying, oh my gosh, when you reflected back to me the term half a century, like I never want to hear that again.
That out there, and then I heard you reflected back, and then I'm like, oh, that was 2 more times that I want to hear that in relation to me.
You're fine with your age, but you don't want to refer to yourself or have anybody else refer to you as half a century.
Of centuries, yeah.
Does it make you think about like a George Washington wig or something? Like you're like
it brings me back to like Mary Queen of Scots. Like how many centuries ago was she alive? 5 centuries ago. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Fair. Do you remember when I used to have, I think I hosted, but I feel like we did it together, the dysfunctional family picnics? Do you remember those?
Dysfunction, like with your family and my family?
Yeah, well, it was open to our friends too. So it was like I did it for a couple years running. It was called the Dysfunctional Family Picnic. And only my friends were in on it, but the whole idea was you had to bring at least one dysfunctional family member to the picnic. But the family members couldn't know it was the Dysfunctional Family Picnic. And
I like that.
yeah, so like Ariana would bring someone, you'd bring people, I'd bring my parents, but it was hilarious because it would be this hodgepodge of friends and then like these wackadoo relatives. And we would have this barbecue and we would play like these stupid games, like the egg toss game and stuff. Do you remember any of this?
I'm not remembering.
I was back in the day.
I like the notion. I'm loving the notion, right? Like it's like, because everybody's family is dysfunctional.
Right. This was just everybody shining.
I'm not having any hidden agenda here about like pretending that like we're functioning in any way.
It's very normalizing when you see everybody else's relatives too.
Well, right. Again, that's how you and that is actually you remember the sitting down meeting with the dysfunctional intern or compromise. Mm-hmm. I remember us sitting in the car saying, my family's more dysfunctional than yours.
Mm-hmm.
You saying back, no, my family's more dysfunctional than yours. And I'm like, you have not met my family. You have no idea what you were talking about. And then you were like, no. And then we said, okay, all right, we're going to have a contest.
Right.
Win. And we're going to get our families together for Thanksgiving.
And we did.
Know that my family's going to take the cake on this. Yeah. I just want you to know. And then you were like, no, right. Game on.
Yes. And then we did. We started having Thanksgiving with your family and my family combined, both of our sets of parents with our partners at the time.
Yeah,
For years, we
right?
would get them together. So ultimately, who won? Whose family was crazier?
We were very evenly matched. I am pleased to say. It was like very evenly matched. I was like, I have met my match.
Yeah,
None
yeah.
of us have to hold more shame. We are equal with the dysfunction.
It is true. How would you describe like my parents' form of like craziness?
It's just like out of touch with the rest of the world, similar to really in their own sphere, like their own space, like not like, again, similar to men, like not interpreting social cues, just um a super high degree of awesome awkwardness. Um
Inappropriate, no boundaries. Can I help you out?
unabashed, weird, poor timing around things said and breaking out into song and questions asked and just like just kind of make you sit there and go things that make you go huh.
Yeah.
It's that response of like huh.
Can you share, maybe we could go back and forth just for a few seconds, some of the most weird things you remember about those get-togethers?
Themes about my just in general or about your parents.
No, in general. Like I remember your father getting up during dinner, Thanksgiving dinner at some point to remove a corn or something off somebody's foot. Do you remember this?
Oh my god,
He had
no.
his podiatry bag with him at Thanksgiving. I can't remember which guest it was.
Yeah.
Mentioned they had a corn or something on their foot and they disappeared in the other room and he did like a little mini
Yes.
surgery.
My father, who's just over identified and can't go anywhere without his podiatry hat on because it actually never comes off.
Yeah, and his bag.
He has his little bag, his original bag that
Like a little black doctor's bag that he brought to Thanksgiving. Or the time was it your mother who was accusing everyone of stealing her knish? For people who don't know, a knish is like a little meat stuffed dumpling thing.
Yes, I mean, I remember it with my parents, maybe because it's attached more with shame. I don't remember as much with your parents being like any specifics, but I do remember, my mother had a terrible eyesight because of her advanced diabetes, and I remember her leaning forward one time and lit her napkin on fire.
Yeah, she lit her napkin on fire during Thanksgiving. I think that was the same time that she was accusing everybody of stealing the knish off her plate. And I think it turned out it was the dog.
It was the dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know what? The part that I remember is I think the dog ate like half the knish and half was left, and she was like fine eating the rest of it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
It was like something in that order. Like the dog had half. The dog like literally bit right into it, and she just was like, "I'll have the other half."
Mm-hmm. Do you remember sometimes our parents would then go out to dinner together? Sometimes they'd get together and go to restaurants. And then my dad would complain to me about your mom pulling the Tupperware out of her purse at the restaurant.
Oh yes, they both were sort of like, yeah, unabashed, like didn't really care so much about the social norms,
Right.
like what other people think. Certainly my parents. And so any relationship is not intended to last because there wasn't much of a sense of we care about what you think.
Right.
In the sense, my mother was her true, authentic self to such a degree.
She was too much herself, just like my parents. Yeah.
There was no sense of the other
No.
or its feelings.
Yeah. My parents are like in an echo chamber for two. I mean, they just bouncing the sound of their own voices off of each other decade after decade after decade.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to remember more specifics, but like that.
How did we turn out? Like, obviously, we have all of these things we've had to work through, but yet we don't have all these other things, right? I mean, if anything, I think we're like uber, almost too aware of how we are socially and what we're putting out there. And
I mean, in a sense, I think it was like, it's been, at least for me, and I'm guessing maybe for you, just this pull to, our pull to differentiate ourselves from our parents. It's taken us on this like self-healing journey, right? To want to understand people and help people and understand ourselves with the kind of awareness that I think was available in just these microscopic amounts for our parents, that somehow, I think it was maybe because of where we came from, but we, moved in this direction to just really, become and so differentiated and opposite where we
I'm
start.
yeah, I'm also thinking about something I would really love to normalize for people, which is different responses to grief.
Hmm.
Do you
Mhm.
know where I'm going with this?
I'm trying to get one step ahead of you, and I'm not there.
Okay. Just okay. You know, when your mom passed,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I remember you calling me,
Mm-hmm.
and your mom passed really suddenly. Oh, yeah. There's lots of stories we can share about both of our parents' negligence around health issues and avoidance, but your mom passed really suddenly. Remember you calling me and telling me. But I also remember, and I hope this is okay. Obviously, you did grieve, but it was not an easy relationship that you had with your mom, right?
Not at all. No.
And would it be fair to say there was also some sense of is relief the right word when your mom passed?
Maybe, um, for
Felt like-
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's mixed in there. It's definitely mixed in there. Although, I still think what's more present for me than relief is it's still anger.
Anger
Yeah.
that she went when she did, how she did.
And she was the kind of person that I never really was able to deeply connect with, that she didn't provide me with the emotional closeness that I wanted and needed growing up, that she was such a difficult character and so traumatized and angry that she never really worked on that trauma, never really worked to keep herself emotionally or physically healthy, and was, um, just angry about the malalignment, the misattunement between
Yeah.
the two of us.
Which is something you and I really share in terms of our relationships with our mothers, that we really didn't get much.
Yeah.
Really didn't get much in terms of that emotional nurturance or support or
Right.
loving modeling, right?
Or attunement, that I was just blatant misattunement.
Blatant misattunement,
Over
just
and
kind of like
over.
consistently getting it wrong. Like it was
Yeah.
almost like a talent. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was like a handbook on like what not to do as a parent. Like it was
Yeah.
pretty consistent.
Exactly. Yeah. Just the shame that I would experience so consistently about her over the years. And it just, yeah, I feel angry about having been brought into the world and parented by somebody who I felt consistent distance and shame with. And
Yeah. And how, I mean, you're a really loving mother. You really are to your kids. So how did you transcend that? How did you figure out how to mother differently than your mother mothered you?
I mean, I'm so honored that you say that about me, and I'm a loving mother, and I think I am in many ways, and I do think that I really echo the reactivity of my mother in many ways as well. And I think I try to be more and more aware of that. But I think I'm still learning, I'm still trying to observe like my reactivity and my part of this whole like slowing down and just like being more present in my life and not taking on as much and not running as fast, so that I'm not as reactive with my kids and I can be more loving.
And
That's
attuned. I
really
see you as being very attuned to each. You have a girl and a boy. identified girl and boy, and you
Yeah,
seem so, I mean, nobody's perfect, but like you're really attuned to them emotionally,
yeah. I
so there's a
try.
consciousness there. Yeah.
Yeah, I try to bring consciousness into my parenting, and it's a lot of work, and my kids are both very different from who I am, and so there's a lot of, and in some ways very similar. So there's still a lot of push and pull, and just trying to really accept them for who they are, even as they're different from me, and honor, just really stepping more into honoring who they are in their differences, and that they're not put on this planet to meet my expectations. They've got their own evolution. Um, and just stepping back from being so, trying to just be so controlling about how things, just about the process and expectations about outcome for them. And yeah, and maybe I'm just hard on myself, but I try to be loving, and I see a lot of the ways in which I fell short, um, more so than the ways in which I get it right.
I see so many ways you get it right, but I think that's the predicament of a loving parent, right? A loving parent does tend to sort of fixate more on what they think they've gotten wrong than what they've gotten
Mhm.
right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to play with you today, and just thank you for showing up here today and over it and sharing aspects of your story that I think are just really resonant for, I'm sure, a lot of people. They're definitely resonant for me.
I hope so. I hope so. It's been lovely. I love chatting with you always. So,
I love chatting with you
yeah,
too. And I'm so glad that you are also getting over it.
always working on it. It's a lifelong journey.
Lifelong journey.
Lifelong. Nothing is just learned and then we move on from it. Some
Well,
things more than others. But yeah, may we continue to play and be in each other's lives forevermore.
amen, sister. Love you, Monk.
I love you.
Do 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 do. The April in your soul, tears falling like the raindrops through the sound, colors reflection in your eyes. The April in your heart blossoms of the flowers of all kinds. I love them all, I love them all. Spring is in your love, spring is in your eyes, spring is in your heart, I want to live in. And the April of your soul, dark clouds of the winter. The April in your soul, tears falling like the raindrops through the sound, colors reflection in your eyes. The April in your heart blossoms of the flowers of all kinds. I love them